It looks like a postcard from the Pacific.
Everyone looked like the quintessential California surfer.
The Beach Boys.
The Smith family, a living portrait of all things sand, surf, and Southern California sunshine.
They see each other and it's an instant chemistry.
Instantly in love.
I think so.
From the time he met wife Lisa to the birth of 3 handsome, athletic sons. All had become the center of Gavin's universe.
I've watched them grow up and almost to exhaustion, like tirelessly, effortlessly. Every night he came home would just constantly devote his time to the kids.
Gavin enjoyed an 18-year career with film studio 20th Century Fox, but this larger-than-life figure, 6'7" to be exact, had been making impressive strides dating all the way back to college.
When UCLA said, "How'd you like to play for us?"
He was excited. We grew up with UCLA basketball. We'd watch it constantly. It was a dream come true for him.
And what a dream it was, playing for the iconic coach John Wooden.
Did he win a championship?
He was on the last national championship team in 1975.
Next goal, working tirelessly for a chance at the NBA.
He was a physical specimen, worked out every day. You know, he really took care of himself.
But the pros were not in the cards for Gavin Smith. It was a crushing blow.
After he didn't get drafted, you know, when he was with UCLA, he just went off into the mountains for about 5 or 6 days and then came back home.
With the brooding over, Gavin was ready for his next move. He becomes a caddy at a high society golf club and finds his new career path, but not as a golfer.
He met a lot of people there and a lot of movie moguls.
Despite his movie star looks, Gavin would ultimately find his place behind the scenes at Fox, starting from the bottom up.
When somebody looked at him and said, "Oh, you don't know much," he says, "Yeah, but in 6 months I'll know everything you know and I'll do it better." And he did.
Gavin worked his way up the ladder to become an affable, smart film distributor, loved by all.
He was an honest, caring person. Give the shirt off of his back.
But as it goes with many families, the glow of the happy images can fade with the stress of daily life. The real estate tumble put the family's home underwater and financial problems were mounting. Gavin suffered chronic back pain from a previous injury.
Did he share any of his struggles with you?
Oh yeah, I mean, he would tell me how much pain he was in, and it's not good for me, Greg. I'm hurting bad.
Like millions who have become part of the same national epidemic, Gavin became addicted to painkillers.
As anybody who's been there will tell you, is the meds stop working. So you take more and you take more. And it got out of control. We couldn't live without him and they weren't helping, and so he's taken too many.
Gavin went to rehab to tackle the problem head on.
He had to do something and he did it. He took care of it. That's the way he is. He took care of things.
But truth be told, the last few years of Gavin's marriage to Lisa had become a challenge.
Can you give us a perspective of what was going on in the family?
Well, they weren't getting along. We knew that. He'd called me on my birthday, and he had mentioned a couple of things that's not good. He's at a very dark place in regards to his marriage, and the boys are feeling it. He was very depressed.
And there was another dark, damaging shadow cast over the Smith family. It came in the form of an exotic young beauty named Chandrika Creech.
Let's talk about, how did Gavin Smith meet Chandrika?
Gavin Smith met Chandrika at the Matrix Drug Rehabilitation Facility. That's how they became friends and then later lovers.
That's when Gavin's troubles went from bad to catastrophic. You see, Chandrika was also married to convicted drug dealer John Creech. But according to the couple, staying together was a matter of financial convenience.
They're separated, but living together according to those parties. John Creech is actually seeing another woman.
39-year-old Creech told Chandrika he was done with her. In fact, he had fallen in love with an 18-year-old girl still in high school. His lovesick text to the teenager read, "I don't want to come off as that guy to other people, you know, the older perv or something. I like you because of you, not your age. I'm not giving you up." Meanwhile, Gavin had managed to release the grip of pill addiction, but Chandrika was a temptation he could not resist. He moved out of the family home and was staying with a colleague. It tore the heart out of his children. His oldest son, Evan, tweeted, "My dad decided to leave the family last night. Real family sticks together." Gavin was devastated by the broken bond with his sons.
His whole thought process was regaining the relationship with his boys.
Dashing Gavin Smith could, as they say, charm the skin off a snake.
He walked into a room, he filled it up pretty well. Women were attracted to him and the guys wanted to be him.
But Smith, saddled with marital, financial, and health issues, had suddenly vanished.
I think everyone was hopeful that he needed a breather, that, he just decided to get off the grid for a while.
How does a buff 6'7" movie exec with dazzling looks and a blinding smile go unnoticed?
My partner and I would look at each other and we'd change our minds. Oh, he's a missing person. He just left for a while. Maybe he started using drugs again. Maybe he's in a hotel somewhere.
Los Angeles County Sheriff's detectives begin an exhaustive search for Gavin and put a magnifying glass on his personal and professional life in a desperate search for clues.
It was a little bit out there to believe that this was a murder right at the get-go.
Phone records from around the time of Gavin's disappearance reveal a number that was a glaring standout to Gavin's estranged wife, Lisa.
On that list, she noticed Chandrika's phone number and instantly recognized it.
Lisa told detectives about her husband's cheating with Chandrika Creech, so detectives paid a visit to the mistress. Was she helpful?
She never let us in the house. We sat down on her porch and we talked to her for a good hour or so, and she admitted to the affair.
But Chandrika insisted she had no idea where Gavin was. Detectives also learned that her husband, John Creech, a drug dealer and avid bodybuilder, was angry about his wife's tryst with the charismatic Gavin Smith.
When he finds out, he gets very upset and begins sending threatening emails to Gavin Smith saying, I know what you're doing.
Gavin's wife, Lisa, told detectives she was so afraid of John Creech and his threats on her husband, she had once done something unthinkable. Lisa boldly drove 2 of her sons to John Creech's house to try and make peace.
The way she describes it, it was going to be like a family-to-family situation, and that if she was able to get, quote-unquote, the families together, then Gavin would back off and Chandrika would back off, and there would be no need for John Creech to be angry.
Lisa waited in the car while her youngest and eldest sons took what must have seemed like an endless walk to the intimidating John Creech's front door.
The 2 of them would go and talk to John Creech, and basically in an effort to get John Creech not to hurt their father. The boys basically said, listen, we know that our father is having an affair with your wife and that we're very sorry about it.
According to reports, Gavin's youngest boy, Austin, who was only 14 at the time, told Creech, "I'm in the 8th grade. I'm too young to lose my dad." Gavin's sister Tara and brother Greg questioned Lisa's seemingly dangerous decision.
Was it difficult when you heard that she and the boys went over to John Creech's house?
I was quite upset. Why would you send your own children who were underage to confront somebody who think you might murder your husband? I don't get that.
John Creech was even floored by the gutsy move.
Creech was taken aback that they had come to his residence, and then he was angry about having to talk to the boys.
But perhaps the plea for mercy worked.
Ultimately, John Creech makes the statement that you saved your father's life by coming here. That was the way that everybody left it. Coming to the house had quote unquote saved their father's life, and the boys left feeling that their father wasn't going to continue having an affair with Creech's wife.
Detectives were alarmed after hearing these stunning accounts from Gavin's mistress, wife, and sons. They sensed Gavin's disappearance was no disappearance at all. John Creech, they believed, could be a man with deadly potential. And Chandrika Creech may have known more than she was telling.
We knew that we had to look at John Creech and his wife, Chandrika Creech, and we had to basically clear them from any type of allegations.
It turns out Chandrika was not honest when she first told cops she hadn't seen Gavin and didn't know what happened to him.
We did an undercover sting where we had an informant meet with Chandrika Creech, and during that conversation, she laid out exactly what happened.
And the devil is in the stunning details that Chandrika unwittingly spilled to the informant, beginning with the last night Gavin was ever seen alive.
Chandrika and Gavin make plans to meet up again. This time, Chandrika is going to drive to a predetermined location where they're going to meet, kind of a lover's lane for kids.
Creech is suspicious and decides to track her down.
They all have this AT&T family map plan with their cell phone plan, which allows you to be able to track ostensibly where your kids are.
And your wife in this case.
And your wife in this case. And when he finds them, Chandrika is in Gavin's car. They're both seated in the passenger seat of Gavin's Mercedes-Benz. Chandrika is sitting in Gavin Smith's lap.
Chandrika says Creech catches them in a lip lock and becomes unhinged. She jumps out of the car while her lover's towering frame remains trapped in the reclined passenger seat, being beaten to a pulp by a jealous husband on steroids.
John Creech is straddling him, according to Chandrika, and being repeatedly punched by Creech, Gavin Smith to the face.
The injuries to his face is equivalent to falling off a two-story building and landing face first.
He was pummeled.
Yes.
And those lethal weapons called fists were still ready to punish, according to Chandrika.
John Creech stops, gets out of the car, tells Chandrika, "You're next."
Gavin Smith has vanished, and LA sheriffs are getting a partial picture of what happened.
This was not just a missing person.
Gavin's mistress, Chandrika Creech, gave up nothing to detectives at first, but spilled her guts to an informant, revealing that her jealous, bodybuilding, drug-dealing husband, John Creech, gave the popular studio exec a world-class beating. Left him battered inside his black Mercedes and threatened to do the same to her.
John Creech stops, gets out of the car, tells Chandrika, "You're next."
The young adulteress told the informant that she was terrified and hightailed it home. Creech, on foot, arrived a few minutes later. He spares Chandrika his physical rage, but makes a demand.
Tells her that if she doesn't drive him back to the location, he's going to tell the police that she was involved in Gavin Smith's murder.
But was Gavin Smith dead? Chandrika gives in to her husband and drives him back to the scene of the beating. Creech checks Gavin's pulse. There was none.
There's no doubt in her mind that Dick Gavin was dead.
John Creech eventually gets into the vehicle, drives the Mercedes-Benz back to his residence, and then begins making calls to people who he thinks will help him in terms of trying to hide the body and the car.
Both Chandrika and Creech had blood on their clothes. Chandrika claiming hers somehow transferred from her husband.
She threw it in the fireplace to burn them. shortly after that, John Creech threw his clothes into the fireplace and burned them. So the evidence of what they were both wearing that evening was gone.
Creech is getting panicked and makes his first call for help to friend Jorge Valle.
He agrees to help John Creech to hide Gavin Smith's body, but he's not going to let him hide the car at his residence.
The men search for a suitable spot in the hills, but Creech isn't satisfied with the location. Enter Stan McQuay, a championship bodybuilder and friend of John Creech.
McQuay, ostensibly without asking any questions, lets him park the Mercedes-Benz inside the garage
With the body?
with the body.
The team of willing cohorts grows even larger. Next on board to lend a hand is this woman, Rena Lim.
Rena took care of Chandrika's grandmother while she was terminally ill, living in the house, the Creech home.
Creech convinced Lim to rent a large storage locker and a van in her name. Then he heads back to Stan McQuay's garage, where the Mercedes and the body have been sitting for 5 days.
John Creech arrives in a rented U-Haul van, removes the body, and takes the body up to Palmdale, where he buries it.
All by himself?
All by himself.
Creech had other plans for Gavin's blood-stained Mercedes.
So the car then is not driven, it's towed to the storage facility.
Storage unit, yes.
How is it possible that they all stayed so quiet as far as making sure information was never leaked to the police?
I think it was self-preservation. They just felt that at that point, if they came forward, they were going to be charged with something, and so they wanted to keep their mouth shut.
As for Chandrika, cops say she witnessed the murder, but knew little else of the aftermath.
She only knows her husband was responsible for getting rid of Gavin Smith's car and the body, but she doesn't know exactly where they are.
She said John told her that he buried the body underneath power lines, believing that would affect our investigation. We would not be able to locate him.
It's a precarious situation for sheriff's homicide detectives who are building a case but not ready to make an arrest.
We were confident we knew what happened.
But you didn't have the car yet?
Did not have the car, and we did not have Gavin.
And detectives can't compromise the investigation by going public.
We were guarded on releasing information because if we give out too much information, we don't know if somebody's telling us what they heard on the news or what they witnessed or what they know for as a fact.
Even the anguished Smith family believed Gavin could still be a missing person.
He was missing. We didn't know anything other than that he was missing. We did so many searches.
They don't know that whether he's dead or alive. They can't get life insurance proceeds because there's been no legal determination that he's dead.
And every day we were in agony.
But almost a year after Gavin's disappearance, cops get an important lead.
When does the break in the case really come?
The break in the case comes when the police get a tip as to a storage facility that has a Mercedes-Benz.
And there it was in all its tainted glory, a blood-spattered Mercedes, minus a body, but with plenty of pay dirt in the way of evidence.
We found some DNA from John Creech on the key fob and also on the front license plate screw. The Smith family was able to declare Gavin Smith deceased.
I would imagine it's very painful for you and your family to know that John Creech was driving around with your poor brother wrapped in a blanket in the car.
I try not to think about it, but I do. How can you not?
Gavin's sister Tara was crushed.
I remember that day she cried on the couch for probably an hour and a half. You know, she was inconsolable.
Sheriffs begin interrogation roundups for everyone they believed knew about or assisted in Gavin's murder and cover-up. But the case was far from closed for detectives in Gavin's family.
We knew it was a homicide, and then we had to find the body just to get some kind of closure.
And incredibly, it would take another year and a half before Gavin's family would finally get that closure. Detectives would get the most critical pieces of evidence.
We have Gavin's remains.
The discovery was thanks to a hiker named Rocky Ramos and his dog Buddy.
We looked down and we seen what appeared to be a skull. It didn't have no lower jaw, no eye socket or nothing. It just had like the top.
And close by, the most devastating scene of all.
They find a shallow grave, which turns out to be the resting place of Gavin Smith, which his body is now skeletal because of the time period that's passed between his disappearance.
Cops make their move, but they don't have to go far to find John Creech. During the investigation of Gavin Smith, John Creech was imprisoned for drug dealing. Now, he's got a murder rap. By the time John Creech went to trial for the murder of Fox executive Gavin Smith, Los Angeles Deputy District Attorney Robert Grace was ready to pack his own punch on the accused killer.
Almost indescribable violence. A man who was beaten to death by bare fists.
Prosecutors had an arsenal of evidence against Creech.
He surprised them, and that he began to physically attack Gavin Smith, who's seated in the front passenger seat.
There was cracks in his skull, all leading from the front facial area to the back.
Was John Creech capable of such violence? His wife Chandrika had the evidence to prove it. She came armed with photos of previous alleged assaults.
Based upon the testimony of Chandrika and evidence that was presented in court, he committed domestic violence. He was described as being an angry guy.
There were John Creech's haunting words to Gavin Smith's sons the day they came to plead for their father's life.
John Creech states, "You saved your father's life by coming here today."
And even though Creech was dating an 18-year-old high school student at the time of the murder, his ego was crushed by his wife's affair with the strapping Gavin Smith. Like a rabid dog, Creech was protecting his turf. His version, I guess, of street justice.
Yes, you want to see my wife? I told you to stay away from my wife. I'm going to show you who's boss.
Prosecutors handed a seemingly solid case to jurors, parading to the stand each and every person who had a hand in helping cover up the crime.
The individuals that were involved in helping Creech to hide, none of them had prior criminal records. Not Stan McQuaid, not Jorge Valle, not Rena Lim, and not Chandrika. We gave them immunity in order to testify against John Creech.
There was the DNA on Gavin's Mercedes belonging to Creech. The cell phone records putting the accused killer and victim together the night of the murder.
They all are in the same location where ultimately the assault took place.
Desperate for a defense, Creech tried to convince the jury he was attacked first.
He's got a long reach, and he just pinned my head up against the ceiling. And at that point is when I pressed off. I was just like, I just went into, fight or flight mode. And at that point, especially when he bit down on my thumb, I really tripped out.
Then the jury hears that Gavin Smith was wielding a deadly weapon that night.
He approaches John with this hammer. It's on the top is a hammer, and then the end is an ice pick. And he approaches, and he runs at John with this weapon.
No weapon was ever discovered. The jury had much to consider once it went into deliberation, but it took less than an hour for 9 women and 3 men to come back with a verdict. Generally a very good sign for prosecutors and the family of Gavin Smith, who want a first-degree premeditated murder conviction, potentially putting Creech away for life.
I think it was deliberate. I think it was calculated.
What prosecutors got instead would cause a collective jaw drop in the courtroom.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, John Creech, guilty of the crime of voluntary manslaughter of Gavin Smith.
Not guilty of first-degree murder. Not even second-degree murder. But guilty of voluntary manslaughter. In this case, the jury saw nothing more egregious than a crime of passion.
What was the family reaction to the jury verdict?
There was so much proof for a premeditated murder. I just don't know how they could come to that conclusion.
I was extremely frustrated by their verdict. My opinion is that they didn't like the fact that Gavin and Chandrika had an affair. I think the jury felt that he went back even after he had been warned. So in a way, he kind of got what was coming to him. I don't even understand that logic because there's no right to kill somebody.
And adding insult to injury for the Smith family, not a single person involved in the cover-up will face a single charge or do a day of time.
What should have happened to the people who helped cover up the killing?
I think they should get prison sentences. They should, and here they're walking, they're skating, and it's just wrong.
For 2.5 years, those same people kept the crime a secret while detectives poured out blood, sweat, and tears trying to solve it, and the family suffered with the unknown.
A lot of people could have saved our families a lot of pain if they just came forward right out of the gate.
Yes, they were all culpable in what they did in the cover-up, the hiding of evidence, but ultimately there was only one man who caused the death of Gavin Smith, and he was our main focus, and I think they made better witnesses than they did suspects.
Creech faced up to 11 years for the crime. On sentencing day, Gavin's wife and oldest son unleashed a seething wrath on John Creech.
I hope he spends every year of the 11-year sentence that I pray that you give him. He shouldn't be amongst us. He should be in walls like an animal that he is.
Having your father brutally murdered and his body put in a shallow grave. Destiny.
Even the judge expressed disgust.
Your actions after beating Gavin Smith are egregious, heartless, callous. You failed to render aid, you failed to be compassionate, and all you cared about was yourself.
Creech was sentenced under the limitations of California law.
The court selects the high term of 11 years for the voluntary manslaughter.
So, at the end of the day, was justice served?
Anytime that you're able to get a verdict and if you respect our jury system, then yes, justice was done in the eyes of the jury that was hearing the case.
The larger-than-life Gavin Smith left a positive, indelible mark on the lives of so many. Who would have guessed a fall to temptation would topple this vivacious, towering figure?
Nobody deserves to be killed because they had an affair, and if that's the case, there'd be a lot of people that would be dead in America.
He wasn't some adulterer having flings here and there, and that just wasn't him, okay? Unfortunately, this liaison cost him his life.
How would you like Gavin to be remembered?
Smiling. Always happy. He was bigger than life. I loved him, and I missed him. But he'll always be here. Always.